It was under my coffee mug, not sealed in an envelope or pinned to the fridge, just a crumpled napkin, damp from the condensation of my morning orange juice. My name was scrawled on it carelessly, as though it had been an afterthought. That's me, Corey Fletcher, the guy who buys toothpaste in bulk, reflexively responds with "yes, dear," and apparently receives life-changing news via soggy napkins. I unfolded it cautiously, half expecting some random grocery list or a bizarre cat meme she wanted me to see. But no, it simply read, "Going out, just dinner, don't wait up." That was it. No love Cassie, no emoji, not even a period. 5 words that felt heavier than they should have. I stared at the note for what felt like forever before finally standing up. Just dinner? Since when did she need to inform me about something so mundane?
We weren't one of those couples who checked in constantly anymore, but this felt deliberate, rehearsed, like she'd prepared for a question I hadn't asked yet. I glanced at the clock, 5:06 p.m. She must have left while I was taking out the trash. The door hadn't made a sound, not that I heard anyway. As I wandered through the living room, everything seemed foreign, like the furniture itself didn't recognize me. I trailed my fingers along the back of the couch, pausing to stare at our wedding photo. Asheville, 2012. There she was in her white lace dress, and there I was, sweating bullets in my rented tux. Both of us grinning like idiots. It looked like someone else's memory now. The silence in the house was oppressive. I checked her side of the bathroom sink. Her favorite perfume was missing. So was the bold red lipstick she only wore when she wanted to make an impression. On instinct, I opened our shared calendar app on my phone. Nothing unusual marked down. Then, against my better judgment, I pulled up our joint bank account. 2 hours earlier, Amore Ristorante Italiano, $168.44. My stomach churned. She hated Italian food, or so she claimed. Said it always made her feel bloated and sleepy. Dismissed it as lazy cooking. And yet, here she was, spending nearly $170 on just dinner at the very restaurant where her ex-boyfriend took her on their 3rd date. I knew about it because she'd told me once during the oversharing phase of our relationship. Suddenly, that napkin didn't feel like a casual note anymore. It felt like a goodbye letter. So I started packing. Not out of anger or theatrics, but because I'd spent too many nights lying awake, wondering if I'd just been a placeholder until something better came along. I folded her clothes carefully, handling them as though they were fragile heirlooms. Into the bags went her toothbrush, her travel kit, even the book she'd abandoned halfway through. By the time I finished, the bags lined up neatly by the front door, waiting like sentinels for instructions. Then I waited. At 9:37 p.m., headlights illuminated the living room walls. At 9:39, the door clicked open. And at 9:40, Cassie froze. Wine-red heels dangling from one hand, her eyes darted between the luggage and the forgotten napkin still sitting on the counter. Wordlessly, I picked it up, held it out to her, and said softly, "Dinner's over." The moment Cassie walked in and saw her bags lined up like a silent jury, she didn't even drop her keys. She just stood there, staring at them as if trying to recall whether they belonged to her. I held up the napkin, the evidence I'd been clutching all evening. Her eyes darted to it, then to me, and that's when I saw it. Not guilt, not fear, but irritation. It was as though I'd spilled coffee on the rug, and she simply didn't have time to deal with the mess. "Sigh," she said in that flat, condescending tone she used whenever I misplaced the remote. "You're overreacting." Overreacting? I held up my phone, still locked, and said, "You really spent $168 on rigatoni and wine with Jenna?" Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. It was subtle, but it was enough. I used to adore the way she blinked when she was nervous.
Now, watching her do it made me nauseous. "I told you," she said carefully, "it was just dinner." I laughed, a high-pitched, strangled sound that felt like losing air. "Cassie, you hate Italian food. You once said, and I quote, 'If I wanted to feel like a soggy balloon, I'd eat lasagna in bed.'" Her face went pale. She probably didn't remember saying that, but I did. I remembered everything. That's the curse of being the one who cares more. Every tiny detail gets stored in your mind like a fragile archive, and when it all falls apart, it's your mind that gets buried under the wreckage. She didn't respond. Instead, she walked over to the bags and slowly unzipped one, as if checking to make sure I hadn't packed it wrong. I watched her pull out her charger, her lip balm, and a hoodie I'd folded meticulously. Her hands trembled, but her expression remained calm. "You didn't have to do all this," she muttered. That's when I snapped. "Did he drive you home?" I asked quietly. "The guy who loves overpriced wine and your lipstick?" She looked up sharply. "What are you even talking about?" I stepped forward and opened the trash can. On top was the cork from a bottle of Enzimiron, the same wine charged to our joint card. She knew I hated that wine. Once she'd called it "for people who pretend to like pain." And now it was in our trash. "Tell me who he is," I said. "Tell me if it was worth it. Wrecking us, lying to me, using Jenna as an alibi when she moved to Oregon 6 months ago." Cassie's silence wasn't cruel. It was calculated. That's what made it worse. "I didn't cheat," she finally said. "I just needed something that wasn't this." I froze. "This," I repeated, gesturing at our home. "This is me. You're talking about me." She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just picked up her bags one by one, like someone retrieving their coat from a restaurant they never wanted to be in. And then, without a word, she walked out. I didn't follow. I just sank into the chair by the door, the one she used to curl up in with a book she never finished, and stared at the space she left behind. I thought I'd be angry. I thought I'd scream or punch a wall. But instead, I sat there, numb, replaying every detail in my head, wondering how I hadn't seen it coming. The sensation of insignificance overwhelmed me, as if I had been erased from my own existence without the opportunity to review the final draft. Deep inside, I knew this wasn't the conclusion. The truth remained elusive. His identity was still a mystery, but not for long. The following morning, I woke up on the floor, though not due to any dramatic collapse from sorrow. No, it was simply because I dozed off in the hallway next to the laundry basket. At some point, I must have grabbed one of her sweaters and curled up like an embodiment of regret. The house felt cold, desolate, yet somehow retained her scent. I resolved to take the moral high ground, vowing to move forward with grace. To that end, I even drafted a list. Join a gym, update my hairstyle, perhaps try kickboxing or pottery, anything trivial and distracting. But by 8:45 a.m., I found myself entangled in what I knew I shouldn't be doing, sifting through her digital traces. Her laptop was inaccessible, password protected, but she never logged out of her tablet. Cassie, sharp as she was, never anticipated that I would look. In fact, she probably assumed I wouldn't even notice her absence. Opening her browser, I was immediately confronted by a saved message thread titled Work Retreat Group Chat. It contained texts filled with mundane office chatter, project deadlines, event RSVPs, and buried within, a comment from someone named Nolan. "Looking forward to our next wine debrief, same place." My stomach churned.
Clicking on his profile photo revealed a man in sunglasses aboard a boat, clutching a cocktail with an air of overconfidence. He had the kind of face that garnered swipes right, athletic build, chiseled jawline, and likely a laugh that resonated at parties I'd never attend. And naturally, she had never mentioned him. I scrolled further. Her responses were brief but not distant. "You pick the bottle this time," followed by a winking face. "Still laughing about that cab driver, LOL." There was no explicit indication of their actions, nothing overtly incriminating. But sometimes betrayal doesn't require explicit words. You sense the shift in tone, warmth reserved for someone unfamiliar with your midnight frustrations. My heart raced as I continued scrolling until I stumbled upon the photos. Just two, inconspicuous yet damning.
One was a mirror selfie she took in an unfamiliar bathroom, wearing the same dress from the night she claimed was just dinner. The second depicted Nolan lounging on our couch, my couch, legs crossed, drink in hand, TV remote resting on his thigh. I zoomed in. The timestamp indicated 2 weeks ago. She had brought him into our home while I was fixing my sister's dishwasher. I leaned back, the tablet trembling in my grasp. This wasn't merely betrayal, it was intrusion. My sanctuary, my security, everything violated, used like a hotel room in a city I no longer recognized. I didn't shout, didn't weep. Instead, I did the most degrading thing imaginable. I called her. The phone rang twice before switching to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Rising to my feet, I moved to the living room and stared at the couch.
The indentation from where he'd sat was still there, mocking me. Without thinking, I grabbed the cushion and threw it into the trash. Then the other one followed. It was irrational, but I needed to erase him somehow. My hands trembled so violently that I dropped one of the cushions on the driveway. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak in the house made me wonder if she had used the silence to laugh with him. I pictured their hands brushing over my books, their laughter echoing off the same walls where I once whispered, "I love you." For the first time, I felt like an outsider in my own life. But I wasn't finished yet. No, not by a long shot. The next day, I made a decision, one that would expose everything hidden. If she wanted cold, I could go colder. I wish I could say I confronted him like a man.
Like I hunted him down, looked him in the eye, and demanded answers. But no, that would have required courage, something I lacked that week. Instead, I learned who he really was through the most humiliating way possible, a voicemail not meant for me. It happened late the following evening. I'd been ignoring calls all day, mostly from her parents, probably trying to stay neutral. Silence felt safer than explanations. Halfway through a cold burrito and a miserable bottle of beer, I noticed a missed call. Cassie's number. No message at first, but a minute later, another notification appeared. One new voicemail. I put the phone on speaker, arms crossed as if bracing myself. At first, there was nothing, just faint rustling and background noise, like a restaurant. Then came the voice, a man's voice, low, confident, too casual. "Tell him tonight." Seriously, he'll figure it out anyway. Might as well let him go with some dignity. And hey, if he gets dramatic, I'll swing by after. Just text me the emoji again. You know the one. That was it. Click. No name, no formalities, just instructions. Instructions about me. It took a full minute to realize I'd been holding my breath. I replayed the message over and over. I knew exactly what emoji he meant, the stupid lock emoji she'd sent me once when we were dating, joking that I had the key to her heart. She used it with him now. The realization hit me slowly, cruelly. This man, this Nolan, had plans involving my marriage, in my house, on my time, and they laughed about it like it was some inside joke.
I stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen, seeing how hollow I looked. Then I opened my messages and typed one sentence to Cassie. "You left the lock open." I hit send, turned off my phone, and didn't look back. Sleep was impossible. Instead, I wandered the neighborhood for hours, hood up, feeling like a ghost. Everything I passed, the diner where we celebrated our second anniversary, the tiny bookstore she loved, even the traffic lights, reminded me that I'd built a life around someone who had mentally checked out months ago. By sunrise, self-pity had worn thin. I accessed our shared cloud account, a login she assumed I'd forgotten but hadn't. The folder, ironically labeled Us, held remnants of us. Photos, receipts, even a video from Santa Fe I'd long forgotten. But it was the temp folder that caught me off guard. 2 files inside. One, a clearer version of Nolan's boat selfie from the group chat. The other, an Airbnb confirmation for a mountain cabin booked under her name. 2 guests, check-ins slated for next week. She wasn't merely ending our marriage, she was already building another life. No tears came then. Instead, I packed again, not for her this time, but for myself. Distance felt necessary, perspective even more so. Or perhaps I just wanted to scream into a canyon and hear something echo back besides shame. Yet, as I prepared to leave, something rooted me in place. The voicemail replayed in my mind. His voice, the arrogance. And suddenly, leaving didn't feel like enough. This wasn't over yet. Sleep eluded me that night, too. Lights on, I fixated on the voicemail, his face intruding where it never belonged, the emoji Cassie once saved only for me now repurposed elsewhere. Between rage and heartbreak, clarity struck. I needed to remind him who I was. Not the man whose marriage unraveled, not the shadow she discarded, but the husband erased without consent. His number surfaced easily among her backups. A Starbucks receipt joke led me straight to it. I stared at the digits for half an hour before typing one sentence. "You'll never sit on that couch again." No signature. He'd know. When I hit send, 5 minutes passed before his reply arrived. "Tell her she's the one who invited me while you were busy fixing sinks." 6 times I read those words. My hands trembled, my throat tightened. It wasn't just mockery, it was calculated cruelty. A reminder she'd brought him into my space while I handled mundane tasks, trying to hold together the fragile threads of our crumbling life. His aim was true, cutting deeper than expected. I couldn't respond. Instead, I sat frozen, phone face down as if it carried contamination. Throwing it, or myself, seemed momentarily appealing. Then another message appeared. "Want to talk man to man? You clearly need it." Was it mockery or misplaced pity? Either way, it grated. Civility wasn't what I sought, nor some contrived bro chat. What I craved was catharsis, a scream loud enough to shred my vocal cords. Instead, I opened my email. Screenshots, voice memos, the Airbnb reservation, all forwarded to a new folder titled Reality. Seeing it there somehow made it tangible, undeniable. Sometimes it's not a misunderstanding or a simple breakup. It's just life showing its true colors. But then came the twist I didn't see coming. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from someone unexpected. Molly, Cassie's friend. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe even longer. And yet, there she was, reaching out on Facebook of all places. "Hey, Corey," her message began. "I know this isn't my business, but I think you deserve to know. Cassie's not who she says she is. There's more going on than you realize. Check your email." My heart raced as I opened my inbox. Waiting for me was an attachment, a file containing photos, screenshots, chat logs. The first image I clicked nearly made me drop the laptop. It showed Cassie at dinner, not with Nolan like I'd assumed, but with someone else entirely. A third man holding hands, leaning in close. Same restaurant, same wine glasses glinting under soft lighting. This wasn't just one betrayal. It was part of a pattern, a tangled web of deceit. Nolan wasn't the only secret she kept. Molly's final note hit hard. He's just the one you found, but she's been unraveling for over a year. You don't deserve to blame yourself for something so far beyond your control. That's when everything clicked into place. The late nights at work, the emotional distance she claimed was stress, the excuses about needing space. None of it had been about exhaustion or routine. It was detachment, a deliberate, calculated exit she'd started planning long before I ever noticed the cracks. Suddenly, Nolan wasn't the problem anymore. She was. And now it was time to confront her, not to beg or scream, but to close this chapter the way she never gave me the chance to do. Face to face, armed with the truth. I asked her to meet me at a small cafe near the park. Not because it held any symbolic meaning, but because it was public enough to keep things civil, and they served the only muffins she used to pretend she didn't love. When I arrived, I sat down at a table with a folder in front of me. Inside were printed screenshots, receipts, and a transcription of that damning voicemail. It felt dramatic, almost theatrical, but I needed something tangible to hold on to while everything else seemed to slip away. Cassie walked in 10 minutes late, wearing sunglasses despite the gray skies. She slid into the seat across from me as if this were nothing more than a casual business meeting, not the unraveling of our marriage. No apology, no attempt at small talk, just crossed legs and that practiced calm exhale she always used when pretending to be the reasonable one. "So," she said, brushing invisible lint from her knee, "you wanted to talk?" Without a word, I slid the folder toward her. She didn't even glance at it. "I know about Nolan," I said quietly, "and Jason, and the Airbnb." Her jaw tightened for half a second, not surprise, but irritation, as though I'd inconveniently interrupted her weekend plans. "Look, Corey," she said, her tone dismissive, "I knew this moment would come eventually. You've been looking for a reason to play the victim for years." Those words stung more than I expected them to. I leaned back in my chair, pressing my fingers against the warm ceramic of my coffee cup, just to anchor myself. "Play the victim?" I echoed, my voice steady, despite the storm inside me. "You lied, Cassie. You brought strangers into our home." She shrugged, unbothered by the weight of what she'd done. In that moment, I realized how much of myself I'd lost trying to make sense of her actions. But sitting there, surrounded by evidence of her betrayal, clarity finally surfaced. This wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself she'd tried to erase. The conversation ended without resolution, but it didn't matter. For the first time in months, or maybe years, I felt free. Free from the lies, free from the guilt she'd tried to pin on me, and free to rebuild a life rooted in honesty instead of illusions. You convinced me that questioning you was a sign of madness. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I quietly folded your clothes and packed your snacks. She glanced at the folder hesitantly, her hand hovering above it before withdrawing. It wasn't about them. It was about rediscovering life. "You don't make me feel anything anymore," she said, each word hitting like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, hoping for some softening or retraction, but none came. She sipped her drink casually, as if discussing the weather. "You used to laugh," she remarked. "Now all you do is mope around fixing things and sighing." "I was holding everything together," I muttered defensively. "You were exhausting," she replied bluntly.
That was the final blow. There was no apology, no shame. She had rewritten our story so thoroughly that I became the problem, the emotional weight she wanted to shed. I stood up slowly, feeling her eyes on me, judging every move as though I was overacting yet again. Before leaving, I turned back and delivered one last line. "You didn't just end the marriage, Cassie. You buried it, danced on its grave, and invited strangers to celebrate." She didn't flinch. Instead, she smirked, a cold, calculated smile reserved for manipulation, not the warmth I once fell in love with. That smirk lingered behind me like a shadow as I walked out. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine off, staring ahead. It wasn't confusion about what to do next. It was clarity. She never loved me the way I loved her. She loved the idea of me, the safety net, the audience. But I refused to remain a supporting character in her performance. When I got home, it wasn't to wallow, but to rebuild without her. 3 days passed in silence. No texts, no emails, no midnight calls begging for explanations. Part of me expected relief, but instead, everything felt surreal, as if she'd slipped into an alternate reality where our marriage never existed. Meanwhile, I stayed in the house, haunted by the dent in the carpet where her suitcase once rested. The air smelled of absence, and I drifted through the rooms like a ghost. The days blurred together. I oscillated between deleting photos of us and compulsively checking my phone, hoping for contact. Pathetic, I knew. But despite telling myself I was ready to move on, a tiny part of me clung to hope. Maybe she'd return with tear-streaked cheeks and a heartfelt apology. On the third evening, there was a knock at the door. Assuming it was a delivery or neighbor, I opened it half-heartedly. My breath caught. Not Cassie, but Nolan. Taller than I imagined, his smug demeanor even more pronounced in person. He didn't hesitate, simply raised an eyebrow and offered a lazy grin, as if we were old acquaintances meeting by chance. "You look rough," he said. "Mind if I come in?" I blinked, stunned into silence. Why would you even consider that a possibility? He shrugged and leaned casually against the doorframe. "Because I thought we could handle this like mature adults. Cassie's done pretending, and I figured it might help if you heard some of it straight from me, the unfiltered truth." A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp, broken, like something shredding in my throat. "You slept with my wife in my house. And now you want to sit down over coffee and have a closure talk as if we're starring in some self-help podcast?" He didn't flinch. "She said you'd react dramatically." That was the final straw. I stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind me. I didn't want him seeing an inch of my home again. "Say what you came here to say," I muttered. He sighed, exasperated, as though I was inconveniencing him. "She never hated you. She just felt like you gave up on yourself years ago. She said you stopped trying, that you became small." My hands balled into fists. I wanted to hit him. I'm not that person, the one who lashes out. I'm the guy who apologizes when someone bumps into me at the store. But hearing him narrate pieces of my life made something inside me twist violently. "You don't know me," I snapped. "No, but I know what she said after every dinner with you." He paused, letting his words land. "How you'd sigh more than speak. How you always looked tired. How she wanted someone who made her feel alive again." My nails dug into my palms as I clenched my fists. He scanned me up and down, his gaze cold. "If you want to be angry at someone, be angry at the version of yourself you let decay." With that, he turned and walked away, as if delivering wisdom that should set me free. But he was wrong.
As much as I despised him, as much as I wanted to believe he was merely a symptom of Cassie's betrayal, a quiet voice inside whispered that part of what he said wasn't entirely false. And that realization cut deeper than anything else. The morning after Nolan's visit, I stood in the living room for a long time, staring at the remnants of her presence. A pair of earrings still lay on the side table. One of her jackets hung draped over a kitchen chair, and a half-used bottle of shampoo in the shower lingered, its lavender scent masking the stench of lies.
For a while, I contemplated burning everything, erasing every trace, but I didn't. It wasn't nostalgia holding me back, it was clarity. As I packed the final box, I realized something. I was done letting bitterness dictate my story. There was a strange calm in boxing up her things, even the trinkets I once cherished. Each item placed inside felt like shedding weight, lifting something heavy off my chest. When I sealed the last box with tape, I grabbed a black marker and wrote 2 words across the top: "Never again." I sent her a text, just the address and a time, no emotion, no plea. She never responded. But that evening, after taking Elmo for a walk around the block, I returned to find the box gone. That was it, our final exchange. For the first time in weeks, the silence in the house didn't feel suffocating. It felt like freedom. Over the next few days, something strange happened. I started smiling. It wasn't because I had forgotten everything that occurred, but because I finally felt free to breathe without overthinking every moment. I visited the barber and got rid of the long hair she once insisted I keep. Then I enrolled in a writing class and even signed up for pottery lessons. Sure, it might sound cliché, but when life feels broken, molding clay into something new can make you believe you're capable of reshaping yourself, too. Just last week, I walked past the restaurant, the very one where she had her casual dinner. This time, I didn't hesitate or look away. I simply kept moving forward, heading toward a future I now understood didn't include her. And here's the surprising part. I'm no longer angry. Instead, I feel grateful. Sometimes, losing someone helps you realize how much of yourself you sacrificed just to hold on to them. If there's anyone reading this who feels diminished, overlooked, or treated like an afterthought in their own life, take action. Pack your emotional baggage, close that chapter, and step forward. Not for revenge, not for explanations, but for yourself. What part of this resonates with you? Is there a moment in your life that reminds you of this experience? Share your thoughts. You never know who might need to hear your story. Every ending is merely the prologue to a new beginning, waiting for you to write it. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Remember, healing isn't linear, but each step brings you closer to rediscovering who you truly are.